Well, thank you all for joining. As you know, my name's Nick Baker. I am a designer based out of New York. I am focused mainly on furniture, lighting, and everyday objects. And I have a quick presentation to share with you all, and we'll do a VR demo. And then after that, I think we'll get to some questions. So I'll go ahead and start this up here. All right, so I want to start off with my mission as a designer, which is to design objects that embrace a delightful future. And I'm gonna go through kind of my journey as a designer and pull out a few, like, insights into, um, my philosophy, and process around design that hopefully will inspire you and help you, with your design careers as well. So, with that being said, always been making things ever since I can remember as a kid. This is my grandfather. He was an architect, and whenever I visited him, he would invite me into the wood shop and ask me what I wanted to make, and I would say, a boat or a plane, and we'd build it together. Don't know where my parents were. I don't know who would let their 2-year-old toddler use a drill press with not even safety glasses. I don't even know what was going on here, but always enjoyed making things as a kid. And in high school, I took some engineering classes and art classes and discovered industrial design when I was looking into colleges to study. And it just clicked. I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I studied at Savannah College of Art and Design. I got a degree in industrial design. And my first job out of school was making dog toys. I started making dog toys for a pet company. I did all kinds of pet products out in Texas. Really enjoyed it. I mean, this is like first time designing and getting a paycheck. It's definitely as a student, it's like a very pivotal moment of getting paid to design. Did all kinds of stuff. This is a training tool I did. This is it's called the lure stick. You can add treats and help train dogs that are small, so you don't have to keep bending over every time to give them a treat. Also did a bunch of cat toys and cat products. I like this product specifically because it's like the cheapest, crappiest thing you could ever design. It's like a small, little plastic cat toy, and you see them at all the pet stores, and, they immediately just go in the trash. But I think many designers would kind of shy away from this product, but I think that's exactly why I love it, is because no one's really thought about it in a unique way, and added any value to a product like this. So I think, just adding that little bit of design touch to it can really kind of improve a product drastically that's never been thought about before. I mean, specifically with this cat toy, I designed it by taking a ping pong ball and just like drawing a continuous line around the ball. And it creates this like really kind of fun, bouncy toy, but it has openings so the cat can grab onto it with its mouth. It also is kind of wobbly, so it darts back and forth, and cats love, erratic movement. You can like put treats in it. You can like put a ball inside of a ball. It's like there's so many little things that I was able to just add to this simple product that's never been thought about. And it's sold really well on Amazon, so it's like one of my best pet products. And during my time at this pet company, I would come home from work. It was a great job, and I really enjoyed it. But I was kind of getting that itch to, what's the next step? What should I keep on working on? And of course, I love furniture, so I would sketch furniture and post it online. And it kind of became this thing where I was like, hey, people enjoy seeing my work online. Maybe I should just keep posting. And I believe like 2017 or 2018, I just decided to post every single day on Instagram. Um, and I did all these chair sketches. I was also posting like little paper models or 3D renders. It was all just kind of whatever I was feeling at the moment. And it really became this great way for me to improve my skill set, especially at the beginning of my career, and also network online. I made a lot of great connections and friends, and it kind of led me to my next step in my career. I decided to take the leap of faith and quit my job, move to New York. I had interned in New York City and fallen in love with it. So I was itching to get back. I called up my parents. I told them I quit my job and moving to New York, and they were like, "Oh, well, that's yeah, that's great, honey. Like, tell us about the new job you got in New York." And I was like, "I I didn't get a new job in New York. I'm just moving there." And my dad was like, "Well, better save those cardboard boxes so if you're living on the street, you can have somewhere to sleep." They were joking, of course. My parents were supportive of me, and um, yeah, I took the leap of faith, moved to New York, and started the studio. It did not look like this. It looked more like this. I was, wanted to get a full time job in New York. Couldn't really find anything. Had applied a bunch of different places, interviewed places, and yeah, I took up some freelance jobs in the meantime. Again, through a lot of my great connections that I had made online. Started working for companies like Peloton or BarkBox, doing more dog toys. Had connected with my good friend James Connors, and he really kind of helped me get a footing in New York. And we worked on all kinds of projects together. This one was kind of the one of my favorites that we got to work on, which was the Control Labs neural interface device, essentially a one of the very first neural interfaces that you can use to control a computer with your mind. It got purchased by Meta, so seeing Mark Zuckerberg up there with our renderings was pretty cool. And yeah, so for the beginning of my New York career, that's kind of where I was, mainly focused was just doing consulting work, getting my footing, freelancing. I did that for several years, and in the past couple of years, I've started to pivot my studio more into um, independent work. So I'm designing my own projects and objects and pitching them to different companies for licensing deals and things like that. So hopefully, I'll now just share some of my work and pull some insights in from that. So the first insight is to be optimistic. I believe that in order to build a better future, you have to believe in one. And I think that's a pretty obvious thing, but I don't think it's a very popular thing to say, especially nowadays. I feel like there's this constant stream of negativity, and the news will just show you the worst thing that happened every day. And certainly there's plenty of problems in the world that need solving. But I think as designers, I think we are so good at seeing the problems in the world and seeing them as challenges to overcome and finding solutions to those problems. And so I really want to imbue that positive outlook in my work and my studio practice and anyone who works with me. And I think that also bleeds into the products themselves. This idea that you you have a better outlook on the future makes your products happier. And I want to wake up, in the morning and drink out of a mug that puts a smile on my face. So, a great example of this is the strap chair. This is one of the first projects I did when I moved to New York. I had again posted a lot of this stuff online and got a lot of traction. People just didn't believe that this thing would work. It's the idea is you just use straps and you strap anything to a block of wood and make it a chair. And I grew up with my dad and mowing grass on the weekends, and I remember, cinching the lawnmower down with these straps, and I know they were strong. So I was like, I gotta prove these people wrong. I know it'll work. This was in January, so everyone was throwing out their Christmas trees. So I picked up a bunch of Christmas trees, trimmed them down, built a block of wood, and I posted a full length video here of me putting it together. No screws, no glue, no bolts or anything, just friction. And I think at the end here, I give it a good firm sit, just to prove my point that it's strong. I think there's also a video of me jumping on it, but I don't know where that is. It's a really great kind of first project to get my footing in New York. And again, I think it was shown at a few different design events and got posted around on different blogs and stuff. So, it's just a great way to get my work out there. The next thing I want to talk about is sharing your ideas, how important it is. Hopefully, you've seen over, the few slides I have and the future slides I'll show you. Like, I think it's so important to put your work out there and share it. It is way more valuable to share those ideas than to protect them. Um, Sometimes I'll run across designers who are like, "Oh, I had this like perfect little thing. I don't want to share it because I think someone will steal it." I've had my design stolen, and I can still say that putting your work out there is still more valuable. Whenever I see people like protecting their ideas, I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, "Are you out of ideas? Like, can you not come up with better ones? Why are you so afraid of sharing your ideas?" So I don't know. I think sharing ideas is such a helpful and impactful thing that you can do. One project that I was pretty open about was my Yield DIY furniture collection, which was inspired by Enzo Mari's Sedea One, which is his kind of famous DIY chair. And Enzo's chair has flat wood planks on it, so it's not really comfortable. And so I was thinking, like, how do you make a comfortable curved wooden chair? Because you can't curve wood DIY. You can't do Eames molded plywood style, wood in your dad's basement. So, I kind of used this method of hacking together plywood and just screwing it to a frame, and just the force of the screw could bend the thin plywood. I open sourced it, so I shared it online, and people around the world have built these chairs and modified it too. They've added their own kind of different, materials, leather, clear acrylic, all kinds of stuff. So it's just a really great way to share my work. Tell stories, even the small ones. I think I wasn't always like a big storyteller designer. And I remember learning in school, like, oh, you should tell stories with your designs. And I always thought it was kind of like frivolous, like, well, why can't I just design like a pretty thing? Like, what if I just want to design a cool chair? Um, but I've come to realize that stories are actually really important. And I think the thing is that in school, you think the stories have to be this grand thing where you're coming up with this design that solves problems in the world, and it saves lives and everything like that. Um, and I think if you can tell that story and execute on it, that's great. But I think the more impactful stories are the small ones. It's the ones that are just, it's like the cat toy, right? It's something that is so small. I made it by designing or drawing on a ping pong ball. Like, those are the things you're going to remember. And so, another great example of storytelling is like this Days sofa collection that I did for Claire, which is a Polish company. This is my first sofa, and I was really thinking, like, what would be a dream sofa to lay on? And I started thinking about clouds and this idea of inflating and floating, like hot air balloons. And so my idea was I could fill the sofa with air, and it would kind of float up, and then the legs would come down and capture it, um, visually, not actually literally. So I got to work with Claire to design a prototype and develop the sofa in Poland. And I worked on an animation with my good friend Derek Elliott to kind of tell this story. And I think this is another point about telling stories is you don't necessarily have to narrate them. You can tell them visually. Just by watching this animation, you understand the story. You see the clouds in the background, you see it floating up. You understand the concept of the sofa. And I don't even have to tell you about it. Um, the next insight is experimentation. I think this is obviously a pretty big designer um, insight. I think we all do this, and we love to do it. And I think, the big part about this is trying new things, being curious, being open, and also making mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes because you learn from them. This is a bottle opener I designed. This is actually my first product I was going to mass produce myself. Um, and the funny thing about this product is, I never did it. It was a big mistake, and I made a lot of mistakes on the way. I remember I was trying to work with suppliers over in China. I was just looking on Alibaba, seeing who would make a prototype of this, and I had emailed a guy and he said, "Oh, I'll make a prototype in a week for $80. Can you send me the money right quick?" And I'm like, "Heck yeah, that's a great deal." Sent him $80 and immediately didn't respond. I knew it was gone. I got scammed. Um, and really the biggest mistake of this whole project was the fact that I spent like a year doing it and I realized I hated the design. It was a corkscrew on one end and then you could open bottle caps on the other. But I learned a lot, and I think that's the kind of the important key part of experimenting and playing around with whatever you're trying to learn. It eventually led me to create another bottle opener, the spin bottle opener, which is a much more simple design. As a, it's a little desk object as well. A thing I also am really passionate about is giving your designs time to rest and distill. I do a lot of work, independent work, where can explore concepts, create a thing just on my own, and then kind of let it sit out. And I think letting my design sit out gives my subconscious mind time to kind of work on it. Whatever I design, I try to make a physical thing or a sketch of it, a physical sketch of it, so that I can see it in the back of my mind every day I walk into the studio. And I think, giving giving your designs time to kind of sit around can add that like extra 5% to your project. A big, maybe a good example of this was the strap box that I've been working on recently. The strap box is this simple furniture system that has a strap around it. And it really started with the strap chair. The strap chair became this kind of, signature design for me. And I wanted to somehow figure out how I could commercialize it because you can't just sell branches or expect people to go out into the woods and find branches. So, the strap box can be a stool. You can strap two of them together, be like a little shelf. It could be a side table, a plant stand. It's all kinds of things. It's really open ended. And I've had the prototype sitting around the studio for like 3 years. And so I think having that time to kind of let it sit has allowed me to really refine it. And, like even the small details of figuring out that joint on each edge and, switching it from, you know, two two sides on one panel to kind of a male joint and a female joint on one panel allows me to kind of expand the collection. I can now take four long sides and make a big square, or four short sides and make a small square. Obviously, you can make the rectangle version, but it's like those small details that really kind of put the design to the next level. And the last insight I want to talk about is embracing technology, which will kind of lead into the VR demo here. I'm a big fan of, again, being curious and trying new things and embracing technology. I think as humans, technology it almost makes us human. We're like one of the only species on Earth that's been able to kind of craft our world and create new things that, you know, m- help us flourish. When I look back and think about so many great designers of the past, I find this one commonality. Whether it was Eames and molded plywood, or Marcel Breuer and tube bending technology of the bicycle, even Johnny Ive and Steve Jobs using touchscreen technology to make the iPhone archetype. These things seem obvious nowadays. We see molded plywood as just another process, but to them, it was the technology. It was the technology of their time, and so I think that's what I am really trying to explore as a designer. Because I think it's one of the greatest things we can do is to embrace technology and make it beautiful. To be really curious about what people are building nowadays. Um, and the technology of our time is much more digital, right? We have AI, VR, blockchain. How do we show that off? And I think a lot of my work revolves around that, where I'm not necessarily using the technology as an actual like object. I'm not designing the next VR headset. Although I do enjoy that, and I did work on the neural interface device. But I am designing objects that kind of tell the story of technology. One recent thing I've been working on is this volcano sofa, which is just this little sketch that I made, and I really kind of liked the form of it. And I quickly put it into Gravity Sketch, such a simple thing to make, and been using a lot of like image to image AI technology to create very quick and realistic renderings of this. This was simply take the screenshot and then type in leather sofa, and you have an image that looks real. And the great thing about this compared to text to image AI is I can control the design. It's still my design. I'm just using technology to kind of enhance that. It's insane how powerful the tools are nowadays. And I've even kind of been playing around with the recent kind of upres AI softwares where now I can take this rough, well, it looks pretty realistic, leather sofa on the right and make it even more realistic. It's incredible. It's incredible that this image came from that Gravity Sketch screenshot. This one was actually specifically a key shot rendering first, but adding AI upresing to it really adds that 5% extra level of detail. So I want to start talking about this super chair, and then we'll jump into VR to review it. But I think the super chair really uh, adds all of the philosophy together into kind of one product. So it really started out with this concept where I was exploring this idea that there's so many great chairs that you can recognize just by a silhouette. Just if they were black and white on a screen and you just saw the outline of it, you would know, oh, that's an Eames chair or whatever. And I was like, wouldn't that be fun if that was like a design prompt? And so I just started sketching like, how can I design a chair that's recognizable just by its silhouette? And I was doing this kind of S cantilever shape. And when I sketched out that line through it, I was like, oh, this is like a simple plane. And it could be easily done in Gravity Sketch. And, I think, the rest is pretty self-explanatory. I popped it open, pulled out a plane, pulled out the form. I think what's unique about this too is it's very much a Gravity Sketch influenced design. It's not the easiest thing to draw in 3D on a 2D piece of paper. It's also not the easiest thing to do in traditional CAD. It's not really easy to do if you're making a paper model. It's really the easiest thing to do in VR. So I think there was a lot of influence there. And, going back again to sharing my ideas and telling the story online, I had posted a rendering of it and people really loved it. And a week later, I get an email from an Italian businessman and Damiano Latini, and he emails me and he's like, let's meet. I want to talk about the chair. And so I meet him in New York and we sit down and he says, I want to make the chair and I want to put it in Milan. And I was taken aback. I said this is amazing, but let me sleep on it. And ultimately we pursued it and developed it. And also Antonio Lenzillo, who's another designer, really helped kind of do the production design and art direction of it. And we showed it in Milan, and it was amazing to kind of see my chair design come to life that I had just created the year before, and got to see the factory, see the injection mold. Definitely a dream kind of classic designer project. So I'm going to open up VR and hopefully everything's working here. It might take me a second to get things connected. Okay. All right. Okay, so please stop me if things go awry, because I can't see anything. But so I kind of wanted to look at, I would say, like the first instance of the super chair and kind of how it came to be. Again, going back to this point of distilling and just letting my design sit, I think had originally had this concept for a chair that looked like this. It had this like rectangular surface and it was kind of pressing down on these two rectangular legs. And I was like, oh, this is kind of a cool design. I was like, it could be like a stone. And it was this kind of, undulating, very like surfacey, flowy project. And so I think when I had just saved this and put this away, I didn't really think much of it. It was just a quick little doodle. Um, and when I had sketched out that like S shape, when I was thinking about the silhouette of the super chair, I was like, oh, it kind of reminds me of that one chair I designed. So I opened up this file again and came back in and started messing around with it. And that this is kind of like the first instance of the chair. It was like pulling out that original surface there and then simply making a few subdivisions. And I make a bunch of copies of it, so if I need to go back, I can go back and edit. So kind of when I formed this design here, I was like, okay, this is a entirely new concept. I need to make a new page. All right. So then, as you can see, this is like the actual super chair scene here. So it starts again with this one that we just looked at, but it kind of keeps going. And, a lot of this was just these small refinements here. I'm also using existing furniture to kind of double check the ergonomics and surfacing and proportions and things like that. Um, and at a certain point here, I take the chair and render it out, and I'm not sure which one that is. Maybe it's like this one where I take it and I render it and I post it online. And that was really kind of the spark, right? This is like at the moment where I'm like gaining attention and thinking, oh, well, maybe I should pursue this farther. Um, again, bringing in, the Panton obviously has a similar cantilevered style, so taking inspiration from that. There's a bunch of different, chairs that I'm testing out. Obviously, not every one of these chairs is really the most comfortable. This guy is not great. It looks great, not the best to sit in. Um, and around this time, I think I had met with Damiano Latini and had started to really, you know, make the deal official. So was starting to refine this and make sure all the details were in there. I was exploring a little bit of what's a bar stool look like, or what's a an armchair look like. And some of this is starting to get into the details where I'm working with Damiano and we're talking about, well, we need to make this a little bit more comfortable because having a flat back like this is not super comfortable. So I was looking at what if we curved it slightly like this, or you could also maybe curve it like this. There's a few different versions here. And so a lot of this, it's just these small little refinements that are hard to really look at here. Some of these were I was testing, oh, what if it has this kind of lip to add some more strength to it versus keeping it super thin. Um, but I think there's something so magical about it just being a thin sheet. So we pursued that path and, bringing in some photos here or renderings just to look at the profile of it. And ultimately I, finished the design and handed it off to the engineering team. And, they had to make a few adjustments in terms of kind of the the curves here to make sure that it was structurally sound, and also had to curve the bottom so that your heels don't always hit. Um, but the final design turned out great. It's stacking and everything. It can kind of stack infinite. It kind of just does this like bouncing thing. You can just like go up like that. So I'll conclude the talk there. Thank you all. I know we want to save some time for questions, so maybe we can jump into that.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you, Nick. That was amazing. I think for the first probably half of your presentation, there were no questions in the chat. And that wasn't because people were not interested. I think people were just like so focused on what you were saying. Um, so yeah, thank you for that. It was an incredible presentation. Um, I have so many questions, and there's so many questions from the chat, but we also have an amazing Q&A guest. So I would love to welcome him first. So yeah, everyone, please welcome Ross Lovegrove. He's going to be joining us today for asking a few questions to Nick. So yeah, welcome, Ross. If you can turn your camera and your mic on.
Okay, I should be on. Can you see me? Hang on.
No, we can hear you, but we can't see you.
Okay.
There we
Here
go. Welcome, Ross, joining us from the desert.
Absolutely. It's I got the aircon on. It's so hot. I am in the desert, actually. Not here, but I am in the desert. There we go.
Great. Well, yeah. Do you have any questions for Nick?
Well, I've been watching it all, and I've also been following the questions pop up. I think Nick obviously has a following. I think he's got some people out there who are gunning for him, which is a good thing. We all need that. I mean, it's an interesting trajectory for me. I mean, just that looking at what Nick did at the very outset. I mean, Savannah's a very good school, so they've got a good mindset, and very good people come out of Savannah. And then you can't make it up, because you go to college, you need a job, so you get a job with a pet product company, and it's not something you're going to rest too heavily on at a dinner party. It's one of those things where you've got to start somewhere, and we've all done that. But I actually think he made the best of it, and there was I think Nick has got these multiple dimensions to him, which they're almost like different people, and I'm just trying to find what is the common thread through that. I mean that in a compliment, actually. So, you start drawing on ping pong balls, and then we're looking at gravity sketch. So, I mean, it's how to define something in space with whatever tools you have. They always say you use the tools you have any way you can to produce anything you can. You never look at anything from a kind of negative perspective. You force your way through, and that was certainly true of the Eameses with the Shazam chair and so on. I mean, they did get a lot of help from the military, which nobody talks about too much, but in their day. But so you start there with pet products, which I know is a very big, it's a big sector actually. But there's good product design in there. Things get made. They're good. They've got commercial outreach, and then suddenly out of nowhere in New York, you're working on this sort of very advanced device. So that's another you. You've got the pet you, you've got the device you, and then I'm trying to understand where that breakthrough moment is, because you're obviously somebody that likes to sketch, and sketching is the most wonderful thing. And because it's personal, and you don't have to show anything to anybody until you feel like it or you don't feel like it. So it's a very personal thing. It's not dependent on energy. It's the most independent thing a creative can do. So it's a very valuable art form. So you can see that. You can see how that's come out in your use of Gravity Sketch. But you have a very unexpected, very good sense of proportion. And my take on Gravity Sketch is I would not use it probably to go into detail. You would not design a watch with it because you just can't do those things. It's so complex. I'm not talking about an Apple Watch. I'm talking about a Swiss, historical watch. So it's that thing. Well, maybe I'm wrong, but it's that thing where I think it's a technique which is very suitable for human scale. Would you say that's true, Nick, in your experience?
Yeah, I think yeah, maybe I forgot to touch on that, but it's one of the biggest things that I use VR for is mixed reality and designing one to one. So a lot of times, with the super chair, it's all designed one to one. With all my products, it's one to one scale. So I can flip on my, headset mixed reality cameras, see the studio space, put a virtual chair down, pull my desk chair over, sit in it, so it kind of looks like I'm sitting in the virtual one.
Yeah.
And those things are going to only get even more powerful over time, whether it's adding more realistic lighting and form to the virtual rendering, or even just, if I have a prototype of the design, I've 3D printed out the super chair. So I could 3D print out the physical, curve of it. It looks really rough. It's just like a piece of plywood with 3D print glued onto it. But then overlaying the virtual onto the 3D print is, it's the full experience. It's like, it looks like it feels like it, and for a fraction of the price and faster than you could ever think of doing it any other way.
It's an interesting thought because historically, I talked to you a little bit about Knoll early on and my experiences. When I started Knoll, because I worked with them for 3 years as their first in-house designer, one of the things I did was I drew over, not directly on, to original blueprints of chairs by the greatest designers that the world has known. And I did that over and over. So what happens is you embed in you a sense of proportion of Mies van der Rohe, Breuer, Saarinen. You get it in you through the act of drawing because it's how people measure. You could say, oh, that's an arm length. You've got this human relationship. And of course, in those days, it's tracing paper and you've got to rub it out, and it's all very analog and manual. So this next step, I think, is really interesting because it's going to be great for designers with instinct. Because when you're working on a chair, you need to know whether that will be comfortable. You have to kind of sense that. Otherwise, you're going to get some pretty daft results, Or then you go into a secondary thing where you work with, I've worked all my life with Italians. So the thing is, they will know, and they're very, very good. It's the Stark thing where Philippe would just do a sketch and then a couple of engineers would turn it into some incredible reality. So I think it's not just Gravity Sketch, maybe a bit of 3D printing. It's got to ultimately go through some process where it touches the knowledge of real life engineering. But I think you know that, and I can sense that.
Yeah,
Just
100%.
yeah, very. I think it's opened up a world for you. I mean, that idea that you can even be on your own when you put this on, and you're anywhere. I mean, that really appeals to me a lot. And when I first was using similar tools in my studio, I had one of the greatest people on earth come to see me, a guy called Peter Davis, who he's working with shoe design right now in Munich, but he's got he's incredible. And he identified me, and he came to my studio, and we spent a few days together just drawing in fresh air. And I mean, it's probably one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever had, because it's so independent. And the problem with design these days is it's the high complex stuff.
Yeah.
Not independent. You've got to say to people, move that a bit, up a bit, and it's not direct enough. And, so I think what's interesting is that your understanding of Gravity Sketch has lost nothing of your knowledge of when your father told you to pull down on the drill.
Yeah.
It's really no different.
I
My
mean,
best, yeah, sorry, Nick,
oh,
go
well,
ahead.
I mean, I just want to add to that point because I think it's a great point, and it's something that I feel that tension there too. Either work in the old traditional ways where you're working with your hands and like building paper models, or go all in on AI and VR. And my thought is, you don't have to choose. Let's just choose the best tool for the exact moment we need it. And I think that's the beauty of it, is it's not a, one or the other. It's just this constant evolution and building on top of each other.
Well, it's
If
funny,
I
just
can jump in there with like just to add to that, I've always told you, Nick, that you when you like when people see your work, when I see your work, I could guess that you're a very traditional designer, right? Like your designs are meant to be these iconic pieces, right? Like the most traditional are of traditional. But then when you start kind of like digging into what your actual workflow is, there's so much in it, right? Like there's very traditional tools that you use, but also you're just exploring the most advanced ones, right? And ultimately, it's not about one or the other, as you're saying. It's just like whatever. Like a tool is a tool. What I need to do is actually bring my ideas out, and that's what I love about your workflow.
Yeah. And I will add, because that's a great point, Danielle. It's like, especially nowadays with AI moving so quickly, it's, with the sofa example, just to take my idea in my head and have a realistic image in 30 minutes, it's so powerful that I think it's really gonna push us all to just focus on coming up with great ideas, and then everything else is kind of the quick process into how do you show that. And of course, there'll still be a lot of work on engineering and manufacturing it, but it's interesting to see the future.
We have a lot of questions in the chat and we run out of time. So guys, like people in the audience, so sorry about this. We can probably answer one or two and then we'll jump into our music set. Um so many. All right. Well, there's one that it's kind of like quite straightforward. What is the one thing you wish you did in university that would have helped your career now?
Hmm. I mean, I have an answer. It's not a fun answer. It's not like a super insightful answer, but I think one thing I kind of struggled with in university was just being a broke college kid and cutting corners on all of my prototypes and projects in terms of buying the right materials and stuff. So I spent a lot of time, I guess, being too frugal. So I think I would have wished I spent a little bit more just to use the right tools at the right moment and use the right materials at the right moment. I think that could have helped me um, come up with better projects and spend more time on the design side of things instead of you know going to the dollar store and hacking together some project. Um, I think also, I mean, that's an answer like very specific to me, but I think an answer that's much more broad is I think it's super important nowadays to have that real world experience and get internships. Um, and we could go down the rabbit hole of like whether it's worth it to get a free internship or not. I think that's an interesting debate, especially nowadays when in the U.S. people go into $250,000 worth of debt to get a degree, and some people don't even get internships during their college career, and it's a really interesting question of where education will go in the future, whether or not it will kind of evolve into some sort of internship, apprenticeship style, kind of going back to the roots of, the great Renaissance painters, where you're kind of studying and helping out a great master. I think that's kind of where I see the future of that going. So I think, thinking about that could really help expand your career in other ways.
Great. One last one before we jump out. Great presentation. This is from Andrew. Great presentation. What is it like to refine the 3D data from Gravity Sketch when working with engineers for production?
Yeah, I think so. I can export a. You can do sub D, export to sub D, and I usually import into Rhino to change that sub D to a step file, and then I can go from step file to SolidWorks or whatever to add the final touches of fillets or Boolean operations. So it's definitely at the point now where you can make a manufacturable product with Gravity Sketch. I mean, this one, pretty recent here. The mug. This is all Gravity Sketch surfaces. This is just me with my hands shaping this thing. So it's pretty crazy to see that come to life.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Nick, for this amazing presentation. Thank you, Ross, for jumping into the Q&A session.